Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 1st of August 2011, the podcast that yells, "Food fight!" and then runs out the door. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's inoculate ourselves against the news of the bogus. With all of the bad news we've been confronted recently about the harm caused by anti-vaccination forces, it's nice to have a bit of good news. According to an article published in the journal Pediatrics, deaths due to varicella, that's chicken pox to non-doctors out there, have been almost entirely eliminated, and the vaccination program is absolutely to credit for it. The varicella vaccine was introduced in 1995. After the first 6 years, the varicella death rate dropped 66%. After 12 years, the rate dropped 88%. This decline was across all age groups, although the biggest reductions were in those under 20 years old. In that group, the death rate dropped 97%. Of all of the deaths due to varicella that have been reported to the CDC since 1997, less than 3% had received the vaccine, and every single one of that 3% were taking steroids for other conditions. Steroids are immunosuppressants, so the effectiveness of their immune system was lowered, and that includes the part of the immune system that was boosted by the vaccine. All of this is with the one-dose varicella vaccination. To boost the overall immunity even further, a second dose is now recommended. This paper predicts that this could completely eliminate varicella as a threat, not only by boosting individual immunity, but herd immunity as well. Remember this the next time an anti-vaccination nut bar tries to tell you the vaccines don't work. Not only are you safer if you're vaccinated, you're safer if everyone around you is too. It sounds like a chant that would be said by libertarian hippies if there were such a thing. What if they gave an election and nobody came? That's the situation in Tar Heel, North Carolina, where there are literally no candidates on the November ballot. Mayor Rick Martin is not seeking re-election, and neither are the 3 members of the town council. During the 2 weeks the Bladen County Board of Elections had open for filing, no one else stepped in to run for any of these offices. As a result, the only thing that will be on the ballot is write-in slots. This seems like a good trend to me. Perhaps federal candidates should take note. If every single politician who wanted to raise the debt ceiling, get us involved in more foreign wars, and support and extend the insane war on drugs just didn't file for re-election, it could happen, but it probably won't. Maybe I'll just move to Tar Heel. And the good news just keeps coming in. The Texas Board of Education voted unanimously to reject the addition of creationist materials to biology classes, instead approving scientifically accurate textbook supplements from respected publishers. The supplements were recommended by a review panel staffed with scientists and science educators. Creationist supplements were submitted by International Databases LLC, a creationist organization. The board agreed to go with the recommendation of the panel and ignored the submission of the creationists, 14-0, with one member away on vacation. According to Eugenie Scott of the National Center for Science Education, an organization that helped fight the creationists and get the science-based supplements approved, quote, "These supplements reflect the overwhelming scientific consensus that evolution is the core of modern biology and is a central and vital concept in any biology class. That these supplements were adopted unanimously reflects a long overdue change in the board. I commend the board for its refusal to politicize science education." Same here, Jeannie, and kudos to you and your organization as well for yet another victory against the forces of ignorance and superstition. Now let's face the benighted bird brain that is this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Dr. Richard Kent, who is a retired medical doctor and minister with no science degree at all, is a creationist. And before you go sighing, thinking that he's one of those sneaky, mealy-mouthed, intelligent design or teach the controversy yahoos, no, he's a good, solid, old-school, young earth creationist yahoo. In video after video, he trots out all of the old canards, many of them lifted almost verbatim from Kent Hovind. What is it about creationists and the name Kent, anyway?
Okay, well, look, we're in a studio right now. Somebody made the studio, right? Sure. Is that somebody made the studio? Here's a glass full of water. Somebody made the glass.
I wonder why he didn't say the water's designed.
Here's the Bible. Somebody printed the Bible. There's a clock. Somebody made the clock. Well, guess what? There's a universe. Somebody made it.
Sure.
Does that sound reasonable to you?
No, it doesn't. It sounds full of unfounded assumptions to me. Each and every one of those things is designed because we know the process by which they're made, and we know of no natural process whatsoever that can result in buildings and the other things you mentioned. You need both of these criteria to determine design. He can't apply either of those to the universe.
Very, very reasonable. It's common sense,
It's
actually.
common sense, isn't it?
Maybe because they know that appeal to common sense is a fallacy?
Anywhere in this world, the materials that get thrown apart don't come smooth and round. They come with jagged edges.
That's right.
So how come the planets are not jagged in shape? They're just smooth and round and like tennis balls.
See, what did I tell you? Basic creationist ignorance. He doesn't even understand that planets are held together by gravity, and that if the gravity's strong enough, it'll warp the planet into a spherical shape.
They're beautifully formed because they're created by God. That's the whole point.
Then God goofed because planets aren't perfectly round. They're oblate spheroids. And what about asteroids and some moons? They're lumpy, potato-shaped things. Are they created by God too? Are potatoes God's holy food? Instead of bread and wine, should we be having communion with potato chips and wine? And then there's Iapetus, the giant space walnut. Okay, now that we've established bad science, let's get to the evolution.
According to the evolutionists, actually they keep changing their mind. On this slide it says the universe is, or the Big Bang, supposed to have happened 20 billion years ago. They now reckon it's about 13.4 billion years ago.
No, they don't keep changing their mind. They keep getting more and more accurate measurements. The current figure is 13.7 billion plus or minus 100 million years, less than 1% margin for error. No one ever changed their mind about this. Kent is dishonestly cherry-picking the high end of a much older estimation when the universe was calculated to be between 12 and 20 billion years old. The current figure is well within this range. No one changed their minds about anything. We've just been able to measure it more accurately.
I don't know where they get these figures from, by the way, but anyway.
You mean you haven't even bothered to do any basic research on the subject? You haven't even looked into the WMAP survey, which is our best measurement of the universe to date? And of course, this is cosmology, not evolution, but guess what Kent does?
The types of evolution there are, they love to believe in these 6 types of evolution. They talk about cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar and planetary evolution, organic evolution, and macroevolution.
That's right, he falls back almost verbatim on Kent Hovind's long-debunked 6 types of evolution. You know, people who debate honestly discard points that have been shown to be completely stupid, but creationists don't care the first thing about honesty. What's interesting is, he does equate kind with species.
And then what most people would regard as evolution is changing from one species to another.
But ignores that speciation has been observed numerous times. But that isn't the only thing he shamelessly lifts from Kent Hovind. He goes into the usual creationist train wreck of misinformation, including the Bogosity about peppered moths and the straw man version of the first law of thermodynamics.
Creation of matter and energy from nothing is opposed to the first law of thermodynamics. So in other words, everything, matter and energy, everything in the universe has to come from something. And it can't create itself. That's what the first law of thermodynamics says.
Of course, that's not what the law says, and we know through the Casimir effect that particles can and do form from nothing without running afoul of the real first law of thermodynamics. He even goes so far as to use the exact same references as Hovind does, including the Prentice Hall textbook from 1992. He even goes into an incredible amount of fail by saying,
And the second law of thermodynamics deals with something called entropy, which is a big word, but it just means that everything goes downhill. And that's, by the way, if you have a nice hot cup of coffee or tea in front of you, it's cooling down because of entropy.
Whereas anyone familiar with the equation delta S equals delta Q over T will know that a cup of coffee that cools down loses entropy. That's an example of entropy decreasing. And all of this is just in the first 15 minutes. The rest of the video is no less of a train wreck than the first quarter, with ridiculous claims like, all cells are very complex, when of course he's looking at cells that are a result of 4 billion years of evolution and aren't at all like the ones that would have started out. He blatantly denies the thousands of transitional fossils in existence. Stupid things like this.
You don't see your pet dog changing into a monkey or a cat or a bird or a duck or anything.
Because that would falsify evolution. Once again, creationists show they don't understand the first thing about the real science that they're attempting to denigrate.
There is no known case of modification of DNA that's caused anything better. It's always worse.
Oh yeah? Well, tell that to the people who have a mutation that makes them immune to HIV. Tell that to the Italian family who has a mutation that lets their body fully break down cholesterol and not have to worry about heart disease. In fact, tell that to anyone capable of drinking milk. Geez, it's not like you can't just look this stuff up. All of the old canards are trotted out, including irreducible complexity, right down to the old, quote, mind of Darwin.
Charles Darwin actually admitted that the evolution of the eye was a real problem. And this is what he said. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for emitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, said Charles Darwin, I freely confessed, absurd in the highest degree.
Okay, keep reading. What did Darwin say next?
And then he goes on to say, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down.
No, you liar! That is not what he goes on to say. He goes on to say this. Yet reason tells me that if numerous gradations from a perfect and complex eye to one very imperfect and simple, each grade being useful to its possessor, can be shown to exist, if, further, the eye does vary ever so slightly, and the variations be inherited, which is certainly the case, and if any variation or modification in the organ be ever useful to an animal under changing conditions of life, then the difficulty of believing that a perfect and complex eye could be formed by natural selection, though insuperable by our imagination, can hardly be considered real. Your next quoted passage doesn't occur for another 5 paragraphs. It goes on and on and on, and there's nothing in this that hasn't been debunked. Even on YouTube, you can find the real information, not only in my channel, but Aaron Raw, Potholer54, Don Exodus 2, Thunderfoot, CDK007, and many others. Folks, there has been no improvement whatsoever on the creationist front. They are still hawking the same lies, the same misinformation, the same dishonest quote mines as they were 20 years ago. So although Dr. Richard Kent wins no awards for originality, or even basic honesty or research skills, he absolutely wins the title of this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Well, after that onslaught of Bogons, here's something refreshing. A new recipient of the Silver Cluon Award, an award given occasionally only to those who go beyond the call of duty in exposing Bogosity with a clear and simple method. This time, the award goes to YouTube user PowerM1985, who goes by the name of Miles. Apparently, when he's at home, he's a PhD candidate working on, quote, non-enzymatic transcription of nucleic acids and the control of gene expression using mutant riboswitches by synthetic guanosine analogs. I have no idea what that means, but he sure sounds smart to me. He recently uploaded a video called Proving Homeopathy Wrong in Your Kitchen. Now, proving homeopathy wrong is about as difficult as selling solar air conditioners in the desert, but when you do it in an incredibly cool way, you cross the line into total awesomeness.
I'm going to show you 2 simple tests that you can do in your own kitchen to prove this homeopathy thing is absolute bollocks.
Okay, the audio isn't the greatest, but he speaks clearly and explains his demonstration well. Plus, he has a sonic screwdriver, pushing the video firmly into the realm of epic win.
Scan the thing. Oh, I broke my screwdriver.
Even if it is broken.
Anyway.
His first experiment involves nitric acid.
Nitric acid? I mean, if like cures like, what's it trying to cure? Burns? Death? Oh, crazy. So, anyway.
Well, according to hpathy.com, nitric acid is, quote, especially suited to thin persons of rigid fiber, dark complexions, black hair and eyes, the brunette rather than the blonde, nervous temperament, persons suffering with chronic diseases who take cold easily, are easily exposed to diarrhea, rarely to those who suffer with constipation. Old people with great weakness and diarrhea, excessive physical irritability, pains, sticking, pricking as if from splinters, suddenly appearing and disappearing, on change of temperature or weather, during sleep, gnawing here and there, as from ulcers forming. Yeah, that doesn't sound the least bit bogus, does it?
So, what do you need to do this?
First you're going to need your homeopathic acid. I'm using 30C because I'm going hardcore these days. Then you'll need a red cabbage, a lemon.
We'll skip the ingredient list. You can get all the details when you watch the video.
First of all, you want to get some of your homeopathic medicine. Pop it there and simply dissolve it up in water. Next, run and take your penny and make sure it's an old one that's actually made of copper. And remember, I'm a trained scientist. I can do this.
With humor and finesse, he drops the penny into the homeopathic acid and nothing happens. But when he drops the penny into some real nitric acid, awesomeness ensues.
Yeah, so what would actually happen if that was real nitric acid in there and I added copper to it?
The nitric acid used here is slightly diluted, and therefore the water molecules are displacing the nitrate ions in the coordination sites around the copper, causing the solution to change colour to a blue. And at the end you can see the entire penny has dissolved. Next
he uses the purple juice from a red cabbage to make a homemade pH indicator.
Let's prove it with some stuff you've got around the house. So, I've got some sodium hydroxide, which everyone should have. It's really basic. So just start to go green first, and if you leave it a while until it all dissolves, it should go yellow. It's going yellow really nice and fast. Next, sodium bicarbonate. And this should go blue. Yeah. Citric acid. So, and this one should go a bit of a reddy pinky colour. And next, vinegar. It should go really red. pH indicator, natural pH indicator. That's cool, eh? Science and nature is fantastic.
And then he uses it to test the homeopathic acid.
So here we have our homeopathic solution of nitric acid. It hasn't all quite gone in, but you know, most of it has. So, what do you think this is going to be? Still purple.
Awesome demonstration, Miles, but you also get extra credit for making even bigger fools of the homeopaths.
It's so daft, I know, especially because they don't do any research. I mean, for example, my video ended up on a homeopathy website under the title, Can Homeopathy Cure Chlamydia? And in the actual description underneath it, it says, no it can't! These people just don't think.
Nicely done, Miles. Enjoy your well-deserved shiny new silver Cluon. But I wouldn't go putting in an acid if I were you. And now it's time to plunge into the depths of depravity with this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! Catherine Becker is accused of drugging her husband, tying him up, and then cutting off his penis and putting it in a garbage disposal because, get this, her husband wanted a divorce. But before you go thinking that's as bad as it gets, I found people who are even worse than Becker is. Becker herself you could write off as a random nutcase, but listen to what the ladies on CBS's The Talk had to say about it.
Catherine Q. Becker is accused of cutting off her husband's penis with a knife, taking his penis and throwing it into the garbage disposal.
Yes, you're hearing this right. They're laughing about it.
Police say Becker attacked him because he filed for divorce. She's being held. She goes, that'll teach him.
Really? Seriously?
I bet you that those prison guards are wearing one of those things that footballers wear? Those metal cups.
Unbelievable. This is somehow acceptable? And even funny? We're talking about genital mutilation here. Oh well, at least they can't get any worse than this.
I don't know the circumstances. I don't know why he filed for divorce. I don't know what was going on between them. However, I do think it's quite fabulous. I mean...
You have got to be kidding! It's fabulous? Someone has had a part of his body amputated, maiming him for life, and you say that's fabulous? Why don't you go live in the Middle East? Live as a woman somewhere where genital mutilation and other forms of physical abuse and torture are considered acceptable, and then tell me how fabulous it is to laugh at an innocent person being tortured and permanently disfigured. What would they say if the roles were reversed? Fortunately, one of them, probably the only rational one on the panel, asked that very question.
There's something I want to point out, though, not to be like a total buzzkill, but it is a little bit like sexist. Like if somebody cut a woman's breast off, no one would be sitting laughing. Like it's not that right to sit around laughing about it if we think about it.
It's different, though.
It is different.
One's floppy and one spits up like that.
So even after their horrible, sexist attitude was tactfully pointed out to them, they still went on to laugh about it, completely shrugging it off. It's too bad we don't have an award for being hideously evil, but them's the breaks. Besides, you shouldn't assume malevolence when stupidity is possible, so I guess I'll just settle for naming them this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! Well, that wraps up this Ex Nihilo edition of the Bogosity podcast. Please visit the forums at bogosity.tv, where you can read the show notes and participate in discussions about these subjects and anything else you like. And if you'd like to participate in the Bogosity podcast, you can send a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. If you put it in an MP3 file, it just might get played in the podcast. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Dara O'Briain. Homeopaths get on my nerves with their science doesn't know everything. Science knows it doesn't know everything, otherwise it'd stop. But just because science doesn't know everything doesn't mean you can fill in the gaps with whatever fairy tale most appeals to you. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Imported License.
Bogosity.